Greetings from the Port of Los Angeles. I'm Philip Sanfield, the Director of Media Relations. Joining me from our offices on the LA waterfront is Executive Director Gene Soroka. Good morning, Gene.
Hello, Philip, and welcome, everyone. It's great to be here today. We've got a lot of information and timely insights to share with you. And in just a few minutes, we'll be joined by Chief Executive Officer of the Harbor Trucking Association, Matt Schrapp. With trucking in the news, I'm interested to hear Matt's perspective and, of course, looking forward to your questions.
Very good, Gene. Let's start with cargo. Please give us July's big picture, the details on import-exports, and where we stand 7 months into the year.
Philip, in short, July was another outstanding month here at the Port of Los Angeles. 935,000 20-foot equivalent units crossed our docks last month, outpacing our July 2019 record. And it was 5% more than last July's strong showing. In fact, we've set records 5 out of 7 months so far this year. Let's take a look inside those July numbers. This data may change ever so slightly as we finish a cross-check on one vessel, but Damian Young assures me that we will update our website very soon with the final numbers. Imports remain strong at 485,000 TEUs, a 3.5% increase year on year. It's also 8% higher than our 5-year July average. On the export side, we moved about 104,000 TEUs, a 13.5% increase compared to last year. While that's a big number, exports have been down now more than 3 years. But we continue to work with the Commerce Department, our ag partners, and others to finally turn this market around. Early success with the dairy farmers is giving us confidence to do more. Moving to empties, they remain elevated at 346,000 TEUs, up about 5% versus last year. Once again, a high number of boxes repositioned back to Asia for the next round of American imports. So where are we now? After 7 months, we're very pleased to be in a dead heat with 2021, our best cargo year ever. 6.3 million TEUs last year at this point, 6.3 million TEUs right now at the close of period 7. Remarkable numbers 2 years running.
That is great news, Gene. What are you seeing on our terminals and across the Pacific that's driving this cargo?
Philip, there are 3 key factors keeping our volume at all-time highs: demand, fluidity, and data. First, demand. Retail, wholesale, and manufacturing numbers have remained strong. We've seen peak season months for the past 2.5 years. Simply put, unprecedented. That said, and as noted previously, imports will begin to ease somewhat. I expect to see that reflected in our August cargo numbers. China factory orders just reported were slowing, and some U.S. retailers continue to state they have elevated inventories. Yet, July retail sales out just this morning are flat, which is good news. It appears that consumers are using the money saved from falling gas prices to spend on other goods. Second, fluidity. Cargo velocity on our marine terminals is better than it was last year. And please remember, there's been no lull in our volume to catch up on the backlog. Yet we've managed to reduce the number of ships waiting at anchor from 109 in January to just 13 today. That's an 88% improvement and a huge accomplishment, all while moving record volume. And even with today's rail challenges, our container terminals are in pretty good shape. I'm especially pleased with the cargo moving by truck. We're down to about 2,000 containers waiting 9+ days for trucks versus more than 32,000 units last October. And dwell time for truck-bound containers is now at 4 days, close to more traditional times, and a significant decline from the high of 11 days dwell. Third, factor here is driving volume all around improved data. The Port Optimizer is providing keen insights compared to even just a year ago. on segments like inbound cargo flow, dwell times, gate utilization, and so much more. The ability to capture this information and get it out to stakeholders in one portal allows all of us to see around corners and tackle problems before they arise. We applaud the Department of Transportation for its efforts to start building a nationwide port data system. The Port Optimizer here in Los Angeles is still the only individual port system operating in the country and has positioned us well for continued growth. Thanks to the efforts of so many, the supply chain landscape in Southern California has greatly improved. At many other ports around the country, ships are waiting for space. Yet here, our terminals have capacity. So for cargo owners looking to rechart their course, come to Los Angeles. We're ready to help.
Gene, thanks for that great overview. Now, let's turn to trucking. Please tell us a little bit about our guest, Gene.
My pleasure, Philip. Matt Schrapp began his career as Director of Environmental Affairs for the California Trucking Association, where he worked on air quality programs and intermodal policy. He then moved to become Vice President of Government Programs for the Velocity Vehicle Group, privately owned companies in the commercial vehicle industry. And then back in June of 2021, Matt took the helm as the CEO of the Harbor Trucking Association. Welcome, Matt. It's great to have you with us. And let's start by telling the viewers today a little bit about the HTA and what work you're doing.
Well, thank you, Gene. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here. The Harbor Trucking Association, we're a nonprofit mutual benefit corporation based here in California. Our members do business up and down the West Coast, like I like to say, from San Diego all the way up to Seattle, Tacoma. We have over 400 individual motor carrier members and are the largest drayage-specific nonprofit association in the United States. We began back in 2008 as a child of the original Clean Air Action Plan, which we're all very familiar with here. And since then have really been part of the larger discussions with both state, local, and federal officials in how trucking operations are impacted by policies and some of the overall volumes, shifts, diversion, et cetera, that we experience out here on a daily basis.
Thanks, Matt. Let's jump right in. In recent days and weeks, California's Assembly Bill number 5, also known as the Gig Economy Bill, has been in the news. We've seen some activity on the ground. How do you see this playing out now? What's the ground response, and what do you see into the future?
Well, AB 5 is not without its challenges. We're still waiting for a clear enforcement pathway from the state of California. It has many motor carriers scrambling to implement plans that were started back in 2018 when the original Dynamics ruling came down from the California Supreme Court. So now while motor carriers are looking to try to implement some of these strategies, you still have a lot of concern out there in exactly how this bill is going to be enforced, not only on in-state California-based motor carriers, but even for those motor carriers who are coming from out of state doing business here. So a lot of head scratching, unfortunately, understanding the reasons for the bill, or at least the said reasons. We're really moving away from worker protection right now and into something different. This industry has been working very hard to combat all the misclassification issues, but I'll tell you, AB 5 is not without its challenges. Specifically, we do not know how the enforcement matrix is going to pan out.
In the complex equation of trucking here in California and at our ports, the new California Air Resources Board rule will be starting on January 1 next year, where California trucks will need a 2010 engine model year or newer to enter both ports or rail yards. What kind of impact do you see that having on our industry, Matt?
Well, right now, according to the Port Zone statistics, we're looking at 23% of full container moves being handled by engines that will be required to be turned over here at the end of this year. And while the remainder of ports outside of LA, Long Beach, and intermodal rail terminals, 2014 model year truck is required here to do business as a first-time VIN entrant in the LA Long Beach port complex. And again, 23% of current cargo volumes are handled by trucks that have 2007 through 2009 engines, which will be required at the end of this year to turn over to at least a 2014 truck model year standard here in LA Long Beach. Of total trucks in service, it's just around 5,000 vehicles that are registered to do business here, and those active vehicles is right around 35 to 3,600, again representing about 23.5%, 22%, 22.5% of total volume that's moved by those truck engineers. So suffice it to say, removing a quarter of the capacity from the system could have profound impacts on our ability to get business done and move those boxes off dock.
Let's pivot over to jobs. The American Trucking Association estimates a national shortage of about 80,000 truckers. What do we need to do to attract, retain, and grow our workforce in this important area while knowing that truck job segments differ throughout industry across the nation?
Well, you nailed it right there, Gene. Here locally, we don't have as an acute of a truck driver shortage as they're seeing in the over-the-road segments. We've seen the drayage truck registry has had additional vehicles, over 1,000 additional vehicles added with drivers compared to this time last year. So more vehicles are coming into the system, which means that there's more folks who are driving them. More commercial driver's licenses have been issued in California, I think, over several decades. We haven't seen this many commercial driver's licenses issued. So we're trying to attract people into this industry constantly. There's no secret that we're always looking for qualified drivers. I think a lot of the time, especially in drayage, it's more about that driver experience, whether it's extended turn times, whether it's the massive congestion on the freeways that we have to deal with down here in Southern California. We're trying to make the experience for those drivers, giving them the opportunity to actually drive as opposed to spending their time waiting around for cargo, either at warehouses and distribution centers or here locally in the marine terminals themselves. So we've always done some strong outreach efforts with our partners at the American Trucking Association and the California Trucking Association, as well as the West State Trucking Alliance, to bring more people into this industry and to provide them with a good wage. I have heard directly from some owner operators, especially, that they're grossing over $5,000 a week and netting well over six figures once they've applied all their expenses. So it's a great opportunity, a great career to get into. As I know, your grandfather was a truck driver. I think most of us have some connection one way or another. If you got it, a truck brought it, as the old saying goes. So we just need to continue to explain how important this industry is to the global economy, and to have these drivers, these men and women, take pride in what they do. It's something that we try to encourage in all conversations that we have.
Well put, Matt, and we've long said these are our first and last mile ambassadors here at the port. We've got to treat them just like that. Let's shift a little bit to the operations on the ground. I've reported regularly that we have 50% of our available truck gates that go unused every day. We've got to try to squeeze more efficiency out of our port. But I wanted to take a moment here with you to demystify this segment of our business. What's your take on how we can better utilize gates and do that work between the truck community and our marine terminal operators at a higher level?
Well, I'll tell you, Gene, we have great relationships with all the marine terminals down here in the San Pedro Bay complex. And for better or worse, not one terminal is alike, no two are the same. And when we think about gate utilization statistics, really there's more to the story than just the number on its face. A lot has to do with volume in the first place, whether or not a terminal is actually handling enough vessels to justify the amount of appointments that are being made available. You also have an issue with cargo availability. Just because something's discharged doesn't necessarily mean it's available. But as we report daily, the number of appointments that are made available to the community, those that aren't used have a myriad of reasons why they're not utilized. If we look at the appointment utilization success, that being the appointments that are booked and then fulfilled, we're at 80, over 90% in some terminal operations. So while we see a utilization issue, and really that has to do a lot with, again, volume, direction from the BCOs, chassis availability, empty return restrictions, dual restrictions, or basic shutouts that prevent us from bringing containers back into the harbor or picking up. So operationally speaking, we need to take a hard look at how these hours are available. I'd like to say that the Savannah Shuffle out on the East Coast, where they moved their gate hours from 0400 to 2100, saw a major uptick in utilization. I think that a lot has to do with either hours of service capabilities for drivers to work on those limited Sunday and Saturday gates that are available, where they've already exceeded their time for total overall driving hours within the 6 or 7 day period, as well as quality of life. It's difficult to try to convince a driver, even if you're paying them extra premium, if you will, for moving at night, to move on that graveyard shift when there is a very strong possibility that you could be shut out in the middle of a dual transaction well after midnight or even after the dinner break. So we're hoping that right now, especially during the negotiations, that there's some robust discussions happening around opening up the gates a little earlier. Right now, we're in the flex where 0700 is a start. We're hoping that we can see at least a double flex where we can look at 0600 to start utilizing those early morning hours as a time for some of these gate moves. I think that a more thoughtful approach is necessary, primarily if we're looking at a capacity loss from potentially from AB5, as well as the capacity loss from the Air Resources Board rules being implemented at the end of this year, not to mention the upcoming Advanced Clean Fleets rule, which will require all new VIN entrants to be zero emissions starting as currently slated 1/1/24. So we need to get a little bit smarter, but I think that it's a function of really working with our marine terminal operators and the ports to help create more opportunity for, and that's removing those restrictions, removing those dual transaction requirements, hopefully getting a smarter gate hours application, and really working with our BCO partners to utilize that available volume and get those dispatches when necessary.
Great overview, Matt, and that's why we've shined a light using statistics on this. It's as if you owned a restaurant, you had 100 tables open for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, but you're only using 50 tables on average per day. And there's a lot of these underlying parts of the equation that have to be worked through, and I really like what you've been doing. We keep up on a weekly basis with General Lyons and sharing the information, not only to shine that spotlight, but to get the action going on the ground. Thanks, Matt. ZE that you just mentioned, going in on January 1st, 2024, that ongoing effort here at the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach to reach our goals by the year 2035 to be a zero emissions truck port. How's the industry doing so far, Matt?
Well, I'll tell you, it's not without its challenges, Gene, to be honest. A lot of it has to do with available infrastructure and current charging levels for existing pedestals or charging capacity. We just do not have a robust rollout of zero emission charging infrastructure. Some has to do with cost, some has to do with land availability, some has to do with restrictions from those fleets that are leasing properties from landlords who are not interested in tearing up the parking lot to put in charging infrastructure that you could be under contract with the utilities for up to 10 years. So we are looking at these challenges. The truck isn't necessarily the hard part. Electric vehicles have been around for a long time. Heavy duty vehicles, where we see the challenge is not only from a cost perspective, and while there is incentives that have been made available by the state of California, it still doesn't recover the 100% of the cost. You're still potentially looking at a residual cost on these zero emission battery electric or hydrogen trucks of over $300,000. That's just for the truck unit itself. That has nothing to do with how much it's going to cost for the infrastructure to support these vehicles, not to mention the limited range that we're currently seeing out of these trucks. 200 miles is probably something that we could count on. But again, this range anxiety for someone who's going out into the Inland Empire without having a robust charging network leading back into their home base here locally in Wilmington or Rancho Dominguez or Compton, Carson, etc., there's a lot of concern that folks will be running out of juice prior to getting back to their home base. Also, weight is also a major concern. Those batteries are not light. We have curb weights clocking in at close to 29,000 pounds for some of the vehicles. Right now, a heavy duty diesel day cab is around 17, 18,000 pounds on the curb. So we're potentially losing 10, 11,000 pounds of capacity, which at the end of the day just equates to more truck trips. So we need to be smart about this, because the industry is not going to jump into technology that's going to cause them to have to spend more money to do less work. While we're all supportive of clean air, we've never been opposed to a lot of the measures that the Air Resources Board has brought forth to try to clean up the legacy diesel fleet. We need to be a little bit more careful in how we approach the zero emission mandates starting as early as 2024. We do not see a robust infrastructure rollout happening by that date. And so my members, as well as larger motor carriers throughout the country who do business here in California, are concerned about this. We're looking at onesie, twosie deployments right now. I think there's about 34 zero emission or electric vehicles that are doing business at the ports of LA and Long Beach. That's out of 21,000 trucks that are registered to do business here. So suffice it to say, there's a long way to go, and we're going to need some serious infrastructure investment by the state, by local jurisdictions, possibly by the ports themselves, to help provide, I guess, certainty when it comes to where these vehicles, these heavy-duty zero-emission vehicles that cost close to $500,000, where they're going to be fueled and how they're going to continue to operate.
Great overview, Matt. Appreciate it. Let's take some questions from the media at this point. Philip, back over to you.
Very good. Thank you, Gene. First, a reminder to the media, please use the Q&A box below for questions and include your name and affiliation. We've got a few, but we're happy to take a few more questions. If you've got them, just type them in and drop them in at the bottom of your screen. First question is from Bill Mongaluzzo of the Journal of Commerce for Gene. Through July, U.S. imports from Asia are up about 6% compared to last year. What's your forecast for imports from Asia the remainder of 2022?
Bill, thanks for joining us. As reported, we continue strong and the outlook remains that way. I've said before in this and other settings that you'll start to see a tapering of some imports, and specifically I mentioned appliances, fixtures for bathrooms and kitchens that were remodeled, some furniture and sporting goods. These are primarily commodities that won't be repeated for purchase every year or on a regular basis. If you buy a brand new set of golf clubs like I did and it did not help my game, I'm not going to buy a new set every year. So that's what we're talking about in the tapering area. But as we heard from the Census Bureau this morning, retail sales continued well in the face of 8.5% inflation as reported in July. Producer price index came down about 0.5 percentage point, but still is elevated at 9.8%. Yet the American consumer's resilience to buy remains almost unabated. So we'll see strong numbers. I think this year we come in with a top 3 all-time Port of LA year in general. We'll have to see now where we stand on inventory. And I thought Brian Cornell from Target really reported out yesterday to say, hey, they took a really big hit in the second quarter. They tried to discount and push out their bloated inventory so they can get a fresh start beginning quarter 3. And that map seems to be playing out well. Lowe's, although they missed their numbers, have good-looking margins according to the analysts. Both Walmart and Home Depot beat estimates for the second quarter. So I like our chances for a very strong back half of the year. And as I said on our last press conference, Bill, the cargo that's coming in the weeks and months ahead looks different than that inventory that's on the ground. Seasonal products, as well as the all-important year-end holidays, and that special toy for the youngsters is on its way. Thanks, Bill.
Very good. Next question is from Eric He of City News Service in Los Angeles. This is for Matt. Matt, given there's already a nationwide shortage of truck drivers, what extra impact, if any, will AB5 have on California truckers?
Well, thanks for the question. And we've already heard of many carriers who have, especially the out-of-state ones, who have decided to just cease doing business here in California. You do have other fleets who are looking at relocating to some trucker-friendly other states like Texas or some of the middle of the country there. The weather's nice here in California, so we're not expecting to lose that many to other states, but losing folks to other industries is a real possibility. It's hard to imagine that the 70,000 owner-operators that have been estimated to be impacted by AB5 will not have some overall impact in overall driver supply here in California and potentially nationally. So it's going to have an impact. How great that impact is remains to be seen, but we're trying to understandably bring more people into this industry. We're always looking for qualified drivers, as I said, but the impact actually is right now unknown. but can't be helpful, though, to say the least.
Thanks, Matt. Gene, a little similar question from Eric, the same topic, AB5. From your perspective, what kind of long-term impact will AB5 have on the Port of LA if it remains in effect?
Thanks for joining, Eric. This is going to be an interesting one to see how it plays out. 2/3 of the cargo that moves through the Port of Los Angeles goes via truck. That balance third is the intact ocean box that moves to and from Asia in the 40 plus unit basis. It remains to be seen. The different business model, brokerage, the cost of belonging in this new sector, and what organized labor makes of this will all be parts of this story that have yet to be written. But we've got to continue to give these folks the service that they require to do their jobs and get the number of runs necessary for these good middle-class jobs to pay out. We'll be watching this closely and working hand in hand with Matt, California Trucking Association, and so many others to make sure the cargo flow is not impacted.
Thank you. Next question is from Edwin Lopez of Supply Chain Dive for Matt. Matt, you touched on this a little bit when you were talking with Gene about carb rules, but between that and AB5, any other thoughts on should shippers be concerned about constrained drayage capacity either now or the first part of next year from your perspective?
Well, hey, Edwin, thanks for the question. And I think that it's important to start having conversations as shippers with your motor carrier partners right now. There's still going to be close to 80% of the trucks that are in service available to move cargo relative to the ARB rules. As far as AB5 is concerned, as Gene alluded to, we're not sure exactly how this impact is going to look. Costs will be going up for those who would like to try to stay in the industry and comply with however that guidance comes available from the state of California for AB5 requirements. So it's possible we could see a little bit of a dip in total overall capacity, but I think it's important for shippers to chat with their drayage providers so they're able to effectively understand what those constraints are going to be moving forward.
Very good. Thank you, Matt. There are a few more questions in the queue, so if anyone from the media has any more, feel free to drop those into the Q&A box at the bottom. The next question is from Colin Campbell, also of Supply Chain Dive. This one's for Gene. Gene, you touched briefly on the rail challenges earlier. Any other details on what the current situation looks like and what kind of solutions are being worked on?
Thanks, Colin. Very important part of the business as we've spoken about in recent weeks and months. Right now, the inland or Midwestern rail terminals look just like the port did last year. Stacks of cargo, folks not picking it up quick enough, and importers who are allowing containers to dwell for longer periods of time than they normally do. With that, we struggle to load the next train and move it out of Los Angeles, for all it's going to do is sit outside of Chicago, Memphis, Dallas, and other locations. We have direct and weekly service to 14 major intermodal distribution hubs throughout the nation. This is an important part of our business. I mentioned 1/3 of all our cargo is that intact ocean box from Asia that gets loaded directly to on-dock rail and moved out to the interior. Cargo that moves by truck to the Inland Empire is then transloaded, value-added services provided, and then put into domestic containers on train to move to those many and major hubs as well. This is vital to our business and competitiveness. Right now, we've got more than 33,700 cargo containers designated for rail sitting on Port of Los Angeles docks right now. In more normal times, that number should be about 9,000 units. And of those 33,000+ boxes, more than 20,000 have been sitting 9 days or longer. We never used to see that much cargo sitting for 9 days. In fact, rarely did we ever get up to that segment level. So we've got to continue to encourage the importers to pick up their cargo faster so we can get the next trains in. It's all about information and velocity. We've got to keep the cargo flowing. The work that we're doing with General Lyons and so many other industry leaders on a weekly basis continues to hammer home the same ideas and ideals that we had here at the ports last year. And you saw what happened. Once we started to get the cargo moving, those ships came in and we kept working it and looked to see where we are now with only 13 ships at anchor. We've got to continue to do that. I know we're working with cargo owners on the import side of the business, large and small, because while some may not need their cargo right now, they've possibly ordered just in case, not just in time, there are other small to medium-sized companies that need their boxes every single day, and we can't get them intertwined with the cargo that's at rest. So we'll keep working across the board. These meetings and discussions are happening around the clock. The two Western railroads are putting out every effort possible to help loosen up that part of the supply chain. We'll keep working at it. But again, this is where data is so helpful, Colin. We're able to see these issues before they become real problems. As you've seen from the stats at the port, we're moving more cargo than ever. But we've got to get all that connectivity through the domestic supply chain in line with the work that we're doing out here. Appreciate you joining today.
Gene, connected to rail, Dan Ronan from Transport Topics is asking if you have any comment on the National Mediation Emergency Board's recommendations to settle the rail contract dispute. Apparently that calls for significant raises, improvements, and some work rules. Will a long-term contract improve intermodal operations in Southern California? And perhaps you can talk about the ILWU negotiations as well.
Hi, Dan. Thanks for joining once again. The Presidential Emergency Board issued a 120-page report with recommendations just yesterday, August 16th. The industry now has 30 days to work towards an agreement with the collection of labor unions representing those rail workers. Yes, I'm optimistic. We've got the highest levels in our federal government watching and working with both sides to get to an agreement. And we've got to pull this tension and uncertainty out of the system so the folks can move all this cargo that we have both domestically and internationally that is in place right now. On the ILWU side, the International Longshore and Warehouse Union that represents the ports along the West Coast, along with the employers group, the Pacific Maritime Association, continue to meet at the table every day on a regular basis to work through their issues. Since our last press conference here in Los Angeles, both sides issued a joint statement stating that they had reached a tentative agreement on the health and welfare safety issues in that contract and move on to the next subject matters. All this happening since they sat down first on May 10th with no degradation of service, no impact to productivity. In fact, we've jumped up once again, loading and unloading more cargo to the average ship here in Los Angeles, more than 12,000 container units per vessel call. That's the best in the business. And as we said, we've worked down the backlog. This stellar month here in July at 935,000 TEUs, best all time, is a testament to the fact that the rank and file men and women are working while the experts are sitting at the table negotiating actively every day. Thanks, Dan.
Next question is from Eric Watkins of Cargo-Matic. Eric is asking, this is for Matt. Matt, with the new Ocean Shipping Reform Act law going into place, will that help with detention and demurrage issues?
Thanks for the question, Eric. Two of my favorite things, detention, demurrage, and per diem. Ideally, yes. Right now, we're already seeing some impacts relative to billing requirements or invoicing requirements that went into immediate effect as soon as the bill was signed. We're also waiting on FMC, who has a rulemaking queued up specifically to adhere to the OSHA requirement that should have a rulemaking put into place after a certain amount of days since the bill went into effect, that will directly require specific standards for detention and demurrage billing, as well as when those charges are actually applicable. We deal with many challenges here, especially about cargo availability, gate closures, empty return closures. So right now, I think that our industry is waiting to make some robust comments on those rulemakings, which we're expecting sometime in late September, October, if not November. Simultaneously, the FMC has now come out with a request for whether or not there should be an emergency declaration put on for certain levels of information sharing. So the FMC is definitely wading in to a lot of these issues that have been plaguing our industry for many years. And we're looking forward to seeing what type of rulemaking we can expect from FMC here in the very near future.
Thank you, Matt. Gene, a couple questions have come in on the China-Taiwan tensions. How do you see that potentially impacting international trade short-term or longer term?
Thanks, Philip. I don't think there's any need for concern from the consumer level. This is a very delicate situation on international relations and tepid waters across the board from decades worth of attempts to have bilateral and trilateral dialogue. So we'll let the experts in these areas continue on the international side, but cargo flow continues, the work on the ground is unabated, and we'll see the goods get to the American consumer as fast as ever. Thanks, Philip.
Thanks. It looks like we have one more question here from Danny Romero at Yahoo Finance. It's for Gene, but Matt may want to weigh in as well. Gene, given your experience in the interplay between the ports, rail, and trucking, what overall can be done to make this supply chain more efficient in the weeks and months to come?
Well, thanks for joining, Danny. And it's about information and velocity. We've got to keep this cargo moving, and we've got to make sure that we know what's coming at us so we can best plan land use, machinery, skilled labor, warehouses, and every other node of this supply chain. And remember, this didn't just start overnight. It dates back almost 4 years ago with trade policy from the previous administration, and even the authors of that policy probably didn't imagine we would see more imports, less exports, and the widest trade gap in our nation's history. We had starts and stops throughout because we tried to bring in a lot of cargo before tariff milestones, taxes on American importing companies went into effect. COVID-19 hit, we lost 19% of our business. We didn't know what was going to happen next. As we looked into the abyss in the month of March 2020, half of our business went away here at the nation's largest port. Then the American consumer's buying power took off like we've never seen before, and it's akin to taking 10 lanes of LA freeway traffic and squeezing them into 5. If you're driving up and a lane closure is in front of you, but the driver next to you doesn't let you in, you fall behind and further behind. It's exactly what the ports looked like last year. Then we found through data mining that folks were sitting on their cargo longer than they normally did. There was no public shaming involved. We were able to segment that cargo away to get the other products to market. And while many of us talk in high tone about retail goods, 25% of all the cargo that comes through LA are parts and components for American manufacturers as well. So this is a wide-ranging group of business segments that we service and cater to here at the Port of LA. What gets us better? Data. Shining a light, measuring, and trying to go after areas that can improve efficiency. That velocity has been proven. If we move more cargo off the terminal tarmac, we can bring the next ship in quicker. The handoffs between the liner shipping company, marine terminal, trucking company, and railroad all have to be in sync. But having that preview early on to know how we need to be prepared on the ground is key to everything. And still, even though there are many opinion makers out there, we're moving more cargo than ever before. Yet, we've got a high bar, and we've got to continue to improve every day. Thanks for joining, Danny.
Matt, any final thought from you on that overall supply chain efficiency from your seat?
Absolutely. And we can really relate to Gene's analogy of jamming 10 lanes of traffic into 5 lanes, especially that we're typically the ones that are on those freeways. And I think that not only information is critical, as Gene alluded to, but operations. We need to think about not only how we're getting boxes off the vessel or off the dock into near dock or off dock return yards, but we need to think about equipment utilization. Last year, towards the end of the year, the trucking industry was drowning in empty containers, something that the ports of New York, New Jersey, and our motor carrier partners are experiencing acutely at this moment in time. So we need to start thinking about exactly how that equipment is being utilized. If I can't return a container and it's sitting on top of a chassis, I'm not going to be able to utilize that to pull a container off the dock. And so the ecosystem that Gene had mentioned, where we're all interconnected, all need to work together to try to understand what the best flow equation is going to be to get the cargo off the ship, get it off the dock, get it to the warehouse, unloaded, get that empty container returned, hopefully with little, if any, restrictions to free up that chassis to move more equipment off docks. The alliances, the ocean carrier alliances, have made it very difficult since boxes are spread throughout the harbor. For one single ocean carrier could have 5 or 6 different marine terminals that handle that same box. Less than half the time, we're bringing that box to a different terminal from where we picked it up from. So we need to think about how we can increase dual transactions by limiting the amount of restrictions that are placed on empty returns, or at least look at additional ocean carrier and port authority investment and even state investment into return yards that are official stop the clock locations that are going to encourage motor carriers to utilize them in order to free up those chassis. So it's a uniquely integrated system, as everyone on the call here understands. We've been flying under the radar for many years, and I think the 109 ships at anchor really ripped the Band-Aid off and brought a lot of folks into this industry. No shortage of armchair supply chain experts either, but a lot of folks into this industry describing solutions. Information is going to be key, but operations are also going to be something that we need to take a hard look at. It's a little disconcerting to see that we're already exceeding the total number of empties that we're handling here. If we can't continue to get those boxes back by having vessels being fully profiled back to Asia, while simultaneously providing empty containers being made available for American exporters, we're going to be in the same situation later. I will applaud the Port of Los Angeles and the Port of Long Beach for making near-dock storage available for empty containers, especially for all these new entrants into the Trans-Pacific trade, which have really thrown a little bit of a wrench into our returning capability. We have marine terminals who are entering into longer-term contracts right now with some of those new entrants, so ideally that should alleviate some of these challenges, but operations and infra are going to be critical, and we're looking forward to the investments that the federal government is going to be making into the Port of LA. Hopefully we'll see a little bit more robust appointment, securement availability through either a centralized appointment system or something to that effect, so our motor carriers can utilize their customer service representatives for more efficient use of their time, instead of working within 6 different appointment systems across 12 different marine terminals, some that you could say would even be 12 different appointment systems, since they each have their own unique standards that they all adhere to. So information is key, operations are important, and equipment utilization, I think, is going to make or break us at the end of the year here.
Very good. Thank you both. That concludes the questions. Gene, I want to turn it back to you for final thoughts.
Thanks, Philip. Matt, really appreciate your insights and great having you with us today. Thanks again.
Thank you, Gene. Really appreciate the opportunity, and thank you again to all who have participated today, and looking forward to more ongoing discussions. Thank you.
To close today, I'd like to share that the Port of Los Angeles received some very good news last week. We learned that our port will receive 2 significant federal grants from the U.S. Department of Transportation. The first, $20 million for a critical grade separation project, and second, $3 million to enhance the Port Optimizer. Last year's passage of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act included $17 billion for our nation's ports and waterways. Those funds are starting to get allocated. The $20 million grant for the grade separation will improve truck access to an important facility on our port's terminal island. It will also reduce cargo congestion while increasing safety for motorists. The $3 million allocation will be used to roll out new components of the Port Optimizer, further enhancing the data and analytics that stakeholders are increasingly dependent on every day. And one of the goals here is that appointment system that Matt just mentioned. Yesterday, President Biden signed into law the Inflation Reduction Act, which includes an additional $3 billion to help ports deploy electrified equipment and reduce emissions. This is a milestone moment with respect to investment in our nation's ports, and it's critical that this money goes where it's needed most. Cargo coming through the Port of Los Angeles reaches every one of our nation's 435 congressional districts. As the Western Hemisphere's busiest trade gateway, we're pursuing every grant dollar available to accelerate plans to build resiliency, increase efficiencies, and reduce our environmental footprint, all while creating more jobs here at America's port. My sincere appreciation to the Biden-Harris administration, Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, Senators Dianne Feinstein and Alex Padilla, along with our Congresswoman Nanette Barragan, and so many other agencies and officials. Their vision, tenacity, and support to rebuild America's infrastructure and further strengthen our supply chain is exactly what this industry needs. Thanks again for being with us today. Until September, take care, everyone.